Behind the explosive action and mind-bending sci-fi of Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mars adventure lies a treasure trove of bizarre production secrets, from mass food poisoning that hospitalized the entire crew to a three-breasted alien originally designed for Star Trek. The film's 16-year journey to the screen involved 7 different directors, bankruptcy, and a mechanical Arnold head that weighed 20 pounds. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about Total Recall 1990. Fact 1. Mass food poisoning apocalypse. When Total Recall wrapped filming in Mexico City in 1990, the production looked like the aftermath of a biological warfare attack, with nearly everyone from the massive 500-person crew laid up with severe food poisoning. The only 2 people who managed to avoid the gastrointestinal nightmare were Arnold Schwarzenegger and co-writer Ronald Shusett, both of whom had learned hard lessons about eating local food during international film shoots. Schwarzenegger's survival strategy came from a painful experience 3 years earlier, while filming Predator in the Mexican jungle, where he had gotten violently ill from contaminated water and local cuisine. This time around, the action star took no chances and had all his meals specially catered and flown in directly from the United States, essentially creating his own private food supply chain to avoid any contact with potentially unsafe local ingredients. Meanwhile, Shusett developed his own unique defense system against the Mexican food poisoning epidemic by giving himself daily vitamin B12 shots throughout the entire 6-month production period. His preventive medical routine proved just as effective as Schwarzenegger's imported meal plan, keeping him healthy and functional while chaos unfolded around the massive set. The food poisoning outbreak was so severe that multiple cast and crew members required hospitalization, and director Paul Verhoeven became so ill by the end of filming that he kept an ambulance stationed nearby at all times in case of emergency. The situation became even more challenging because Mexico City's notoriously polluted air made breathing difficult for many crew members, adding respiratory problems on top of the widespread digestive issues plaguing the production. The irony wasn't lost on anyone involved that while they were creating a science fiction movie about memory implants and alien technology, the cast and crew were being defeated by something as basic as food safety. Despite the medical chaos, the massive production managed to complete filming across 45 different sets and 8 sound stages, though the experience left everyone with unforgettable memories of their time in Mexico City for all the wrong reasons. Fact 2. The 20-pound mechanical Arnold head. Special effects designer Rob Bottin and his team created one of the most elaborate mechanical heads in movie history for the scene where Douglas Quaid pulls a tracking device out of his nose, and the final product was so heavy and complex that it weighed 20 pounds and required multiple operators to bring it to life. The sophisticated puppet was designed to replicate every detail of Arnold Schwarzenegger's face while performing the impossible task of having a glowing spherical object travel through its nasal cavity and emerge from its nostril. The mechanical head featured an incredibly advanced jaw mechanism that could open and close naturally, a tongue that could move and change shape to create realistic facial expressions, and even breathing capabilities that made the puppet appear genuinely alive during filming. What started as a lightweight mask concept quickly became a 20-pound piece of metal and resin when Bottin's team discovered that the delicate mechanisms needed steel reinforcements to prevent the plastic components from warping under the stress of repeated use. The creation process began when Bottin's crew took detailed measurements and reference photos of Schwarzenegger's head, then built a full cast to ensure perfect accuracy in every facial feature. However, when they received the actual footage from the set, they realized the original silver tracker looked too small and insignificant, so Bottin commissioned a much larger spherical device that housed the smaller tracker inside, requiring even more complex internal mechanisms to channel it through the puppet's nasal passage. During filming at a former glass factory in Saugus, California, the mechanical head was positioned carefully while a high-powered laser beam was aimed at the spherical tracker to make it glow convincingly as it moved through the puppet's nose. The scene required precise timing and coordination between the puppeteers operating the head's various mechanisms and the laser technicians creating the dramatic lighting effects that made the tracking device appear to be burning hot as Quaid extracted it from his skull. Fact 3. 3 breasts were Star Trek rejects. One of Total Recall's most memorable and shocking visual elements, the 3-breasted prostitute Mary, played by actress Lycia Naff, actually began its life as a rejected concept for Star Trek. The Next Generation, which had premiered just 3 years earlier in 1987. The unusual anatomical design was originally intended for the character of Deanna Troi, the ship's counselor on the USS Enterprise, but the concept was quickly abandoned during the early development stages of the television series. Director Paul Verhoeven drew inspiration from his medical school education when he decided to incorporate the 3-breast concept into Total Recall, explaining that he had seen medical photographs during his university studies showing that some women naturally develop additional nipples and breast tissue, similar to mammals like dogs. Verhoeven wanted to create a realistic alien variation that would include both large primary breasts and smaller secondary breasts positioned underneath them, giving the character a distinctly non-human appearance that would fit the mutant population living on Mars. The original design actually called for 4 breasts total, but when the prosthetic makeup was tested, the feedback from the production team was overwhelmingly negative. Lycia Naff later revealed that the 4-breast version made her look too bovine, like a cow ready to be milked, which completely destroyed the intended seductive and alien appeal that the character was supposed to have in the film's red light district scenes on Mars. The final 3-breast design proved much more successful and became one of the most talked about visual elements in the entire movie, generating significant discussion and controversy when Total Recall was released in theaters. The concept was so iconic that it was specifically included in the 2012 remake of Total Recall, despite that version taking place entirely on Earth rather than Mars, proving that some visual ideas transcend their original science fiction context and become part of popular culture history. Fact 4. Jerry Goldsmith's Munich Orchestra disaster. The producers of Total Recall made what seemed like a smart financial decision by hiring a Munich orchestra to record Jerry Goldsmith's score, since German musicians commanded significantly lower wages than their London or American counterparts. But this cost-cutting measure backfired spectacularly when the recording sessions produced music that was completely unsuitable for the film. The Munich musicians, while technically skilled, were completely unfamiliar with Goldsmith's distinctive compositional style and approach to film scoring, which required a specific understanding of how to blend traditional orchestral instruments with electronic synthesizers and unconventional musical techniques. Goldsmith had developed a reputation over his decades-long career for creating complex, innovative scores that pushed the boundaries of traditional film music, often incorporating unusual instruments, electronic elements, and intricate brass and string arrangements that demanded musicians who understood his creative vision. The Munich Orchestra struggled with his intricate compositions and failed to capture the futuristic, intense atmosphere that the science fiction action movie required, resulting in recordings that sounded flat and lifeless compared to what Goldsmith had envisioned for the film. The disappointing Munich recordings forced the production team to completely scrap their budget-conscious plan and provide Goldsmith with the funding necessary to re-record the entire score in London with the National Philharmonic Orchestra, musicians who were much more familiar with his style and capable of delivering the sophisticated blend of brass, strings, and electronic sounds that would become one of the most celebrated aspects of Total Recall. The London sessions had to be put on hold for 3 months, while director Paul Verhoeven finished editing the special effects sequences, during which time Goldsmith was able to work on the score for Gremlins 2, the new batch, before returning to complete his work on Total Recall. The final London recording sessions produced what many consider to be one of Goldsmith's finest scores, featuring the driving rhythmic elements and electronic orchestral fusion that perfectly captured the film's blend of action, science fiction, and psychological thriller elements. Fact 5. CGI software breakdown forces hand animation. Total Recall was positioned to be one of the first major Hollywood films to showcase groundbreaking computer-generated imagery technology, particularly in the famous X-ray scanner sequence where passengers walk through a security checkpoint and audiences can see their skeletal structures moving beneath their skin. The visual effects team had planned to use cutting-edge CGI software to create realistic digital skeletons that would match perfectly with the live-action footage of actors walking through the scanner, representing a significant technological leap forward for 1990 cinema. However, the ambitious digital effects plan fell apart completely when the expensive CGI software experienced a catastrophic breakdown during the crucial production phase, leaving the visual effects team scrambling to find an alternative solution that would still deliver the futuristic, high-tech look that director Paul Verhoeven wanted for the scene. The software failure meant that all the time and money invested in developing the computer-generated approach had been wasted, and the production faced the possibility of either cutting the scene entirely or finding a completely different way to achieve the same visual impact. Rather than abandon the sequence, the determined visual effects artists decided to create the entire X-ray effect using traditional hand animation techniques, painstakingly drawing each frame of the skeletal imagery to match the movement of the actors in the live-action footage. This process required enormous amounts of time and artistic skill, as animators had to study human anatomy and movement patterns to ensure that each hand-drawn skeleton looked authentic and moved naturally as the characters walked through the security scanner. The final result was so convincing that most audiences had no idea they were watching hand-animated artwork rather than computer-generated imagery, and the X-ray scanner sequence became one of the most memorable and technically impressive moments in the entire film. The irony was that the old-fashioned animation technique actually looked more realistic and photographic than the planned digital effects would have achieved, since the artists could control every detail to make the skeletons appear as authentic X-ray photography rather than obviously computer-generated graphics. Fact 6. Patrick Swayze's Lost Mars mission. Patrick Swayze was fully cast and committed to playing Douglas Quaid in Total Recall when the project was under the direction of Australian filmmaker Bruce Beresford in 1988, and the production had already progressed to the point of building elaborate sets in Australia and hiring hundreds of crew members before everything came crashing down due to financial disaster. The De Laurentiis Entertainment Group, which owned the rights to the film, filed for bankruptcy just as production was scheduled to begin, leaving Swayze without a role and forcing the destruction of all the expensive sets that had been constructed for the ambitious science fiction project. Arnold Schwarzenegger had been pursuing the Total Recall project for years, constantly pushing to be considered for the lead role, despite producer Dino De Laurentiis' strong belief that the Austrian bodybuilder was completely wrong for the part of an ordinary construction worker who discovers he might be a secret agent. De Laurentiis envisioned Douglas Quaid as an everyman character who could blend into normal society, and he felt that Schwarzenegger's massive physique and distinctive accent would make it impossible for audiences to believe he was just a regular blue-collar worker living a mundane life. When the bankruptcy put Total Recall into turnaround, meaning any studio could purchase the rights, Schwarzenegger saw his opportunity and convinced Carolco Pictures to buy the project specifically as a starring vehicle for him. The actor took an unusually active role in the development process, overseeing casting decisions, script revisions, and production choices, to ensure that the film would be tailored to his strengths as an action star, while still maintaining the complex themes of identity and reality that made Philip K. Dick's original story so compelling. Schwarzenegger's involvement transformed Total Recall from a more cerebral, character-driven thriller into the explosive action spectacle that audiences experienced in theaters, complete with elaborate special effects, intense fight sequences, and the kind of physical stunts that showcased his abilities as an action hero, rather than requiring the more subtle dramatic performance that Swayze would have brought to the role. Fact 7. Michael Ironside's 50 push-up insurance test. Michael Ironside, who played the ruthless villain Richter in Total Recall, cracked a rib during one of the intense fight scenes but continued filming without missing a beat, demonstrating the kind of tough guy attitude that made him perfect for playing dangerous characters throughout his career. After 3 weeks of trying to work through the pain, a producer finally insisted that Ironside take time off to recover properly, but the film's insurance company refused to cover his return to the set unless he could prove beyond any doubt that he was physically capable of handling the demanding action sequences. The insurance company's unusual requirement was that Ironside had to perform 50 consecutive push-ups in front of witnesses to demonstrate that his chest and rib injuries had healed sufficiently for him to resume his physically demanding role as Schwarzenegger's primary antagonist. Despite his doctor's strong advice against attempting such a strenuous physical test while still recovering from a rib injury, Ironside was determined to get back to work and decided to attempt the 50 push-ups that would satisfy the insurance requirements and allow filming to continue. The push-up test went disastrously wrong when Ironside re-injured himself after completing only 30 repetitions, proving that his doctor's concerns had been completely justified and that he was not ready to return to the intense physical demands of action movie filming. However, the attending physician decided that 30 push-ups were sufficient evidence of Ironside's recovery and declared that the insurance requirements had been met, allowing the actor to return to the Total Recall set, despite having just demonstrated that his injuries were still problematic. Ironside's first scene upon returning to work was the memorable elevator fight with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but he struggled to lift his arm properly due to his ongoing rib problems. The production team arranged for Oakland Raiders quarterback Jim Plunkett to provide a special chest brace that had been designed for his own football injuries, which helped stabilize Ironside's chest and made breathing easier during the physically demanding fight choreography, though Schwarzenegger was extremely careful to avoid hitting his injured co-star during their scenes together. Fact 8. Arnold's handcast mystery. Arnold Schwarzenegger broke a finger on his right hand during a rehearsal for the intense hand-to-hand combat scene that takes place in the Mars Hilton Hotel suite, an injury that required him to wear a hand cast for several weeks during the remainder of filming and created an unexpected challenge for the cinematography team. The injury occurred while Schwarzenegger was practicing the choreographed fight moves with his co-stars, demonstrating his commitment to performing his own stunts even during what should have been safe rehearsal sessions, where actors typically work at reduced intensity to avoid exactly this type of accident. The broken finger and resulting hand cast presented a significant problem for continuity, since Douglas Quaid was supposed to be an action hero capable of using both hands effectively in fight scenes, gunfights, and other physical confrontations throughout the movie. Rather than delay filming while Schwarzenegger's finger healed completely, director Paul Verhoeven and cinematographer Jost Vacano developed creative camera angles and staging techniques that would keep the actor's injured hand out of frame as much as possible during subsequent scenes. If you watch Total Recall carefully after the hotel fight sequence, you can notice that Schwarzenegger's right hand is frequently hidden behind objects, positioned out of the camera's view, or obscured by creative lighting and staging choices that the filmmakers used to work around his injury. The production team became experts at finding ways to show Schwarzenegger in action without revealing the medical cast that would have completely destroyed the illusion that Douglas Quaid was an unstoppable secret agent capable of taking on entire armies of enemies. This wasn't the only injury Schwarzenegger sustained during the physically demanding Total Recall production, as he also suffered a serious cut to his hand when a micro-explosive failed to detonate properly during the scene where Quaid smashes a train window, forcing him to break the glass with his bare hand, and resulting in a deep laceration that required medical attention. The combination of injuries demonstrates just how physically punishing the elaborate action sequences were for the lead actor, even with professional stunt coordinators and safety protocols in place. Fact 9. The Kuato Puppeteer Army. The grotesque mutant leader Kuato, who emerges from the belly of his twin brother George to deliver cryptic messages to Douglas Quaid, required a massive team of 15 different puppeteers working simultaneously to bring the character to life, making it one of the most complex practical effects creatures ever created for a Hollywood film. Each puppeteer was responsible for controlling a specific part of Kuato's anatomy, from individual facial muscles and eye movements to the intricate hand gestures and body positioning that made the mutant appear genuinely alive and capable of independent thought and emotion. Special effects designer Rob Bottin created Kuato using a combination of sophisticated animatronics and traditional puppetry techniques, with the creature's head being fully mechanical, while actor Marshall Bell wore a complete bodysuit that concealed the complex array of cables, controls, and mechanical systems needed to operate the puppet. Bell not only provided the physical performance by positioning his body correctly and moving in coordination with the puppet operators, but he also performed all of Kuato's dialogue, giving the character a distinctive voice that matched the wise and mysterious personality of the resistance leader. The name Kuato itself comes from the Spanish word cuate, which translates to twin, reflecting the character's unique relationship with his normal-looking brother George, though most audiences had no idea about this linguistic connection when they first encountered the disturbing but sympathetic character. The practical effect was so convincing and lifelike that strangers would approach director Paul Verhoeven on the streets after the film's release to ask whether Marshall Bell was actually some kind of real-life conjoined twin in medical anomaly, demonstrating just how successful Bottin's team had been in creating a believable alien mutation. The coordination required between the 15 puppeteers, Marshall Bell's physical performance, and the dialogue recording created an incredibly complex filming process that required multiple takes and precise timing to achieve the seamless integration of all the different elements that made Kuato appear to be a single, living creature rather than an elaborate combination of mechanical parts and human performance. Fact 10. Predator sound effect Easter egg. During the climactic sequence where Douglas Quaid places his hand on the alien reactor to activate the ancient Martian atmosphere generator, careful listeners can hear the exact same distinctive electronic sound effect that was used for the Predator's targeting system in Arnold Schwarzenegger's 1987 science fiction thriller Predator. This audio recycling represents either a deliberate Easter egg planted by the sound design team as a tribute to Schwarzenegger's previous alien encounter, or simply a practical decision to reuse an effective futuristic sound that had already been created for another film in the actor's science fiction filmography. The sound effect in question is the sharp, electronic beeping noise that accompanied the triangular laser sight pattern whenever the invisible alien hunter was preparing to fire its shoulder-mounted plasma cannon at Dutch's military team in the Central American jungle. In Predator, this distinctive audio cue became one of the most memorable and tension-building elements of the film, warning audiences that the deadly extraterrestrial was about to strike, and creating an instant sense of danger whenever the sound appeared on the soundtrack. The reappearance of this specific sound effect in Total Recall creates an interesting connection between two of Schwarzenegger's most successful science fiction adventures, both of which involve advanced alien technology that poses significant challenges to his character's survival. While the context is completely different in Total Recall, where the sound accompanies the activation of beneficial alien machinery rather than a deadly weapon, the audio similarity links the two films in a subtle way that fans of both movies can appreciate. The timing of the sound effect placement occurs at 1 hour and 43 minutes into Total Recall, during the moment when Quaid finally succeeds in starting the reactor that will transform Mars from an airless wasteland into a planet with a breathable atmosphere. This represents the culmination of his journey from confused construction worker to heroic secret agent, and the familiar Predator sound adds an extra layer of significance for viewers who recognize the audio connection to Schwarzenegger's previous battle against alien forces. Fact 11. The Volkswagen Mars taxi disasters. The futuristic Martian taxicabs that transport characters around the Red Planet's mining colonies were built on Volkswagen chassis, but featured a bizarre design modification that made them nearly impossible for professional stunt drivers to control safely, resulting in a series of expensive crashes that threatened to derail the vehicle sequences entirely. The prop department had installed 2 separate steering wheels in each taxi to create a more alien and futuristic appearance, but this unusual configuration created a mechanical nightmare that confused even experienced drivers who were accustomed to handling modified vehicles for action movie sequences. The dual steering wheel system meant that turning the vehicle required coordination between 2 different control mechanisms, and the conflicting inputs often resulted in unpredictable handling that made precise maneuvering extremely difficult, especially during the high-speed chase scenes that were planned for the Mars surface sequences. Professional stunt drivers who had successfully handled exotic vehicles in countless other films found themselves completely baffled by the unconventional controls, and their attempts to drive the Martian taxis resulted in 3 separate crashes that destroyed the expensive custom-built vehicles and forced the production team to scramble for solutions. Actor Mel Johnson Jr., who played the taxi driver character Benny, accidentally arrived at the studio's Churubusco film studio several weeks before his scenes were scheduled to begin filming, giving him unexpected free time that he decided to use productively by learning to operate the troublesome vehicles himself. Johnson spent his extra weeks practicing with the dual steering wheel system until he mastered the complex coordination required to drive the taxi smoothly, making him the only person on the entire production who could reliably control the vehicles without crashing them. Despite concerns from the filmmakers about having a non-stunt performer handle the dangerous driving sequences, Arnold Schwarzenegger insisted on riding with Johnson during the taxi scenes, rather than using a professional stunt driver who might wreck another expensive vehicle. The decision proved successful, and Johnson performed all the taxi driving stunts himself, creating the memorable chase sequences while keeping both himself and Schwarzenegger safe in the unpredictable Martian vehicles. Fact 12. X-rating horror show edits. Total Recall's original cut was so graphically violent and bloody that the Motion Picture Association of America slapped it with an X rating, which would have been commercial death for a major studio release since most theaters refused to show X-rated films and newspapers wouldn't advertise them. The X-rating system, which existed from 1968 until 1990 when it was replaced by the NC-17 classification, was primarily associated with pornographic films, making it completely unsuitable for an action movie that was designed to appeal to mainstream audiences and generate significant box office revenue. Director Paul Verhoeven, who had previously faced similar ratings battles with his ultra-violent RoboCop, had filled Total Recall with extreme gore and brutal death scenes that pushed the boundaries of what censors would accept in a theatrical release. The original version of Benny's death scene was particularly graphic, showing the treacherous taxi driver character being struck with a large power drill that penetrated his body and caused his bloody entrails to spill out in vivid detail, creating a stomach-churning moment that horrified test audiences and ratings board members. The film's excessive violence extended far beyond Benny's gruesome demise, with numerous other scenes featuring graphic shootouts, brutal hand-to-hand combat, and special effects, showcasing the gory results of futuristic weapons and explosive decompression in the Martian atmosphere. The ratings board determined that the cumulative effect of all this violence was far too intense for an rating, despite the fact that Total Recall was clearly intended as an action adventure rather than a horror film designed to shock and disturb viewers. To secure the commercially viable rating that would allow the film to reach its intended audience, Verhoeven and the editors were forced to trim down numerous violent sequences, remove the most graphic death scenes, and include alternate camera angles that showed less explicit violence while still maintaining the impact of the action sequences. The editing process required careful attention to pacing and storytelling to ensure that the censored version would still deliver the thrills and excitement that audiences expected from an Arnold Schwarzenegger science fiction spectacular. Fact 13. The accidental Capricorn 1 reference. When Douglas Quaid checks into the Mars Hilton Hotel using his false identity, the fake identification card displays the name James D. Brubaker which creates a fascinating connection to the 1978 conspiracy thriller Capricorn 1, where the main character was named Charles Brubaker and was also involved in a government conspiracy surrounding a faked Mars mission. This subtle reference links Total Recall to another film that dealt with themes of deception, false realities, and government cover-ups related to space exploration, though it's unclear whether the screenwriters deliberately chose this name as an homage or if the similarity was purely coincidental. Capricorn 1 starred James Brolin as astronaut Charles Brubaker, who becomes trapped in a massive NASA conspiracy when the agency decides to fake a Mars landing in a television studio rather than risk the lives of the crew on an actual mission to the Red Planet. The film explores themes of media manipulation, government deception, and the difficulty of distinguishing between reality and carefully constructed illusions, making it thematically similar to Total Recall's exploration of memory implants, false identities, and the question of whether Quaid's adventures are real or artificially constructed. The choice of James D. Brubaker as Quaid's alias becomes even more intriguing when considering that both characters find themselves targeted by agencies of their own government after failed plots involving Mars missions that are scrubbed due to technical problems and official fears about the consequences of not appearing to complete their stated objectives. In Capricorn 1, Brubaker must escape from government agents who want to silence him to protect the fake Mars landing secret, while in Total Recall, Quaid discovers that his entire identity has been fabricated as part of a complex intelligence operation. The name appears on screen for only a brief moment as Quaid presents his forged credentials to the hotel staff, but film scholars and fans who caught the reference have noted how it adds another layer to Total Recall's exploration of questions about authentic versus artificial experiences and the ways that powerful organizations manipulate individuals for their own purposes. Fact 14. Real Marines as Martian guards. All the actors who portrayed security guards and military personnel in the Mars colony scenes throughout Total Recall were not professional actors at all, but genuine United States Marines and naval officers who were recruited specifically to bring authentic military bearing and discipline to their performances as futuristic space colonists. This casting decision gave the Martian security forces a realistic sense of military professionalism and tactical awareness that would have been difficult to achieve with civilian actors trying to portray convincing soldiers, even with extensive training and coaching from military advisors. The production team made this unusual casting choice because they wanted the Mars colony to feel like a genuine military outpost, where real soldiers would be stationed to maintain order and protect valuable mining operations from rebel attacks and civil unrest. Professional actors often struggle to replicate the subtle body language, posture, and movement patterns that come naturally to actual military personnel. So hiring real Marines and Navy officers eliminated the need for extensive military training sessions and ensured that every uniformed character would move and behave with authentic military precision. The Marines and naval officers who participated in the filming brought their real-world experience with weapons handling, tactical formations, and military protocol to their scenes, creating background performances that added credibility to the futuristic setting without requiring any dialogue or complex acting skills. Their natural familiarity with military equipment, chain of command structures, and combat situations meant that they could focus on adapting to the science fiction elements of their roles, rather than learning basic military behavior from scratch. This casting approach also provided the production with a ready-made group of physically fit, disciplined performers who could handle the demanding action sequences and long filming days in the elaborate Mars colony sets, without the typical complications that arise when working with untrained extras in military roles. The authentic military presence helped establish the Mars colony as a serious industrial and strategic operation rather than a casual civilian settlement, reinforcing the film's themes about corporate control and authoritarian governance in space colonization. Fact 15. The alien handprint plot twist. The iconic three-fingered handprint that activates the ancient Martian reactor in Total Recall's climactic sequence was never intended to be evidence of alien civilization at all, but was originally supposed to be Douglas Quaid's own handprint, revealing the shocking twist that he was actually a synthetic replica of a human who had been killed by the memory implant machine at Recall. This dramatically different ending would have transformed the entire movie from a story about recovered memories and secret agent identities into a much darker tale about artificial consciousness and the replacement of human beings with manufactured copies. In the original screenplay concept, Quaid would have discovered that the real Douglas Quaid had died during the memory implantation procedure when his brain couldn't handle the artificial memories being forced into his mind, and the Recall Corporation had created a synthetic duplicate to cover up their fatal mistake. The handprint at the reactor would have been perfectly normal and human, but it would have matched Quaid's hand exactly, proving that he had been to Mars before as his original human self, not as the artificial being he had become. This revelation would have explained why Quaid possessed knowledge and abilities that seemed impossible for a construction worker to have, since his synthetic brain contained not only the implanted secret agent memories, but also fragments of the original Quaid's real experiences on Mars. The three-fingered design that appears in the final film was created when the screenplay went through its many revisions, and the alien civilization backstory was developed to provide a more conventional science fiction explanation for the advanced technology. Screenwriter Dan O'Bannon, who co-wrote the original story with Ronald Shusett, had envisioned a much more definitive and disturbing conclusion where Quaid would be forced to confront the reality that he was not actually human, but rather a sophisticated machine built to replace someone who had died because of corporate negligence. This original concept would have eliminated the ambiguous ending that allows viewers to debate whether Quaid's adventure was real or just an elaborate fantasy, instead providing a clear but horrifying answer about his true nature.